After my fiancé bankrolled a college girl and had her baby, I bankrupted him. Chapter 1. 1 month after I flew overseas to meet my biological parents, I came home to find Lucas waiting at Eastbrook International, except it was the first time he wasn't there to pick me up. His full-ride sophomore had collapsed from cramps at her commencement ceremony, and he'd rushed her to St. Luke's. It was a one-off accident. The sponsorship is over. You'll never hear about her again. I believed him and kept planning our engagement gala. But the night before the party she showed up at the Rowan estate, cradling a 4-week-old newborn son. Eyes swimming, she looked tragic. I finally connected the dots. The viral headline, 22-year-old who thought she had cramps gives birth at hospital, had been about her. The baby deserves 2 parents. I have to take responsibility. He puffed up like a knight. I laughed. Everyone already has parents, right? I speed-dialed the mom and dad I'd found only weeks earlier. Mom, Dad, I'm calling off the engagement. While you're at it, tear up every supply contract with Rowan Holdings. Before we go on, hit subscribe and drop your city in the comments. Lucas, walk out that door and the wedding is over, I said, calm as still water. His footsteps hesitated, but he still tossed back, the baby can't grow up without parents. I have to do this. We'll postpone the gala, I'll explain later. I watched him leave without a backward glance, then unclenched my fists. I'll drag that punk home and tan his hide. Richard exploded, while Victoria clutched my arm. Serena, sweetheart, don't be angry, we'll send someone after him right now. No need. I shook my head. The engagement is cancelled. Lucas and I are finished. I've known Lucas since I was a kid, ever since his parents began paying my tuition. To the world we were the perfect fairy tale match. At 18 he confessed he wanted to look after me for life, not just as my sponsor. We'd come so far, only to crash the year I finally met Victor. Uncle Richard, Aunt Victoria, you know me, disloyalty is the one thing I can't stomach. Their rehearsed speeches of reconciliation died in their throats. Don't worry, Lucas is out of my life, but I'll never forget your kindness. Still, let's keep our distance from now on. Your future daughter-in-law and grandchild might mind. I went upstairs and rang a moving company to box up everything I'd left at the Rowan estate. They'd always treated me like family, even keeping a permanent room for me long before the proposal. Watching the room empty, I felt a dull ache in my chest. So a decade of love really can lose to a so-called fated stranger. Downstairs, Victoria kept calling Lucas, but by the time the last carton was gone the phone still hadn't been answered. Serena, sweetheart, calm down, we'll talk this through once temper's cool. She tried one more time. I walked away without a reply. It hurt, but there would be no turning back. Talia's car idled outside. She'd come to help with final fittings. Instead she became my getaway driver. Shameless bastard, knocks up a student, still wants to marry you. She cursed for both of us while I leaned against the cool glass and murmured, remember that headline you showed me last month about the girl who thought she had cramps? That was her. What? That story broke 10 months ago. Her eyes ballooned. I twitched a smile. Earlier, actually, he'd been bankrolling Hannah for 3 full years. Every memory of those 3 years crashed over me, splitting my skull. You're burning up, I'm taking you to St. Luke's. Stress sparked a low fever, so Talia detoured straight to the ER. Of course Lucas and Hannah were there too. She rocked the newborn, the jadeite bangle that Victoria swore would grace only her daughter-in-law glinting on Hannah's wrist. When I'd noticed it missing, Lucas claimed it was being cleaned. Turns out he'd simply regifted it. He dangled a jade amulet over the infant, the silk cord half shredded by tiny fists. I'd knelt on stone steps for 3 hours to earn that amulet for him. He looked as if it belonged there. My fever blurred everything, but Talia doesn't tolerate filth. Before I could breathe, she marched up and slapped Lucas across the face. So Jamie had a baby and forgot to send Serena and me the shower invitations? Chapter 2. Caught off guard, Lucas's head snapped sideways. Hannah lunged to shield him, shrieking, hit me instead, leave him alone, ah. She crashed to the tiles before Talia's hand even grazed her. Shao. He scooped her up, then spotted me behind Talia. Serena? What are you doing here? He snapped. I told you I'd explain when I got back. Dragging your friend to a hospital brawl is low, even for you. I'm not that idle. I'm sick, and I don't chase trash. I kept my voice flat. Talia, let's go. He blocked my path to the infusion room. You're running a fever? Is it bad? And what ex? Quit the dramatics. Sis-in-law, please, it really was an accident, Hannah blurted, clutching my sleeve. Someone spiked my drink at that party. If Lucas hadn't. She glanced at him, then dropped to her knees, sobbing, if I'd known I was pregnant I'd have ended it, I swear. My body just hides the signs. Lucas folded her against his chest, his gaze ice when it met mine. Hear that? She never meant to come between us, this is fate. I gave a small shrug. Fine, let's bow to fate. Lucas, I've already called off the engagement and informed your parents. We're done. Enjoy your little family. I turned, he grabbed my elbow, snarling loud enough for the corridor to hear. What lies did you feed them about Xiao to make them agree? Serena, you're selfish, you never consider anyone else. A perfect match, one plays martyr, the other fires the spite, painting me villain instead of victim. Guess I'm not as kind-hearted as Miss Shaw, Talia drawled. Tomorrow's the gala, yet tonight you deliver a surprise baby. Without your thoughtfulness Serena might have wasted years on this cheater. Spectators finally pieced the story together, curses rained down on the happy couple. I thought that girl was the other woman, turns out you two are the shameless ones. Lucas flushed, opened his mouth, too late. I was already gone. Days later I woke in my hospital room to find Richard and Victoria flanking the bed. Serena, we knew you still loved Lucas, otherwise you wouldn't have collapsed and been admitted with fever. I swallowed a strangled breath. They really overate their son. I'm in the hospital only because I had a minor stomach surgery while I was here and need a few days of rest. Yet the next thing they do is suggest I adopt that newborn son, swearing they can make Hannah disappear. The invitations have already gone out. Calling off the engagement now would hurt the company. Just think of it as saving face for uncle and auntie. Later, the Rowan family will never wrong you. Your face value is nothing compared to my lifelong happiness. I rejected their emotional blackmail outright. They hung their heads in awkward shame, complexions sour, but the next second Lucas burst in, why should she raise him? That's the child Xiao Xiao carried for 9 months. I'm marrying her and giving them a real family. Chapter 3. The Rowans had long since leaked news of my upcoming wedding to Lucas. A romance between the Rowan-sponsored orphan and the Rowan heir was perfect marketing fodder, so their attempt to keep me had less to do with sincerity than with protecting their own interests. What did I just tell you? Apologize to Serena. Richard thundered. Why should I? Lucas ground his teeth as if the universe had wronged him. Everyone thinks I should be with her, why? Because we grew up together? I'm sick of this cage. Don't I get to chase my own love? Richard and Victoria gaped at him. You knelt right here and swore you wanted to marry Serena, that you didn't want her to be just a sister. You forced the issue yourself. When did we ever lock you up? Lucas's face drained, his eyes flicked to me for a second. I only found the scene absurd and hilarious. I know I never wronged him in this relationship, yet apparently I'd become his cage. Lucas, stop acting cornered. From the moment that test turned positive, no, way before, you had countless chances to come clean. But you hit it right up to the day she showed up with the baby. Did juggling 2 women feel thrilling? 2 women actually fool enough to love you? I let out a cold laugh. Get over yourself. Remember this, I'm the one who threw your filthy trash ass out. And you should be on your knees thanking me for blessing your sleazy little secret. My words were razor sharp. Richard and Victoria looked ready to vomit but could not refute a syllable. So what? You're just a poisonous, selfish woman who's always had it your way, Lucas muttered, refusing to meet my eyes. Hannah sobbed all night because of you and your friend. Her health is fragile and she couldn't even get out of bed today. Tell me that wasn't deliberate. Lucas, shut your mouth. I'd heard enough. Eyes closed, I ordered them out. The Rowans' years of sponsorship have been repaid tenfold now that my own career is flourishing. I simply never wanted to see Lucas's disgusting hypocritical face again. What I didn't expect was his vindictiveness. He bribed a nurse to inject me with a hormone that triggers anaphylaxis. The moment my throat began to swell I could barely breathe, couldn't even reach the call button. Lucas stood beside my bed, smiled coldly, and said, "This is the price you pay for hurting Xiao Xiao. Serena, you have everything. Why can't you leave one helpless girl alone? Her pain? You taste it now. If Talia hadn't dropped by, I could have died right there." The little nurse insisted she'd merely misread the label because she felt faint. No one else was involved. Talia wanted to storm the hospital board, but I held her back. "It's fine," I whispered, exhausted. "He's definitely covered his tracks, he'll have some alibi." Letting it slide is too easy. Watching him march toward his own cliff, that's the fun part. I soothed Talia, pulled out my phone, and dialed. Mom, those gifts haven't boarded the jet yet, right? Not for anything else, I'd like you to return them, because I've called off the engagement. And, incidentally, there's one more thing I'd like you to return for me. Chapter 4. Thanks to Lucas's stunt, I stayed another full week after switching hospitals before I recovered. Besides Talia, I told no one, Richard and Victoria included. Probably mistaking my silence for fear, Lucas began to swagger. The day I checked out, friends and colleagues bombarded me with calls and messages asking what was going on between Lucas and me. Turns out he had ridden the wave and gotten engaged to Hannah. Someone even sent me a video of the scene. In it he held Hannah's hand and gravely claimed he and I had amicably split a year ago. The baby had been an accident, he said, and out of pity he'd waited until she recovered to stage this engagement. The guests weren't fools, every invitation and announcement had listed me as the bride. Lucas's explanation? He said I'd sent those messages myself. Because Serena can't let go, she hacked the info and embarrassed everyone. I apologize for the confusion she caused. His shamelessness actually made me laugh. I created a WhatsApp group with every mutual friend, then dumped every photo and chat record I'd collected, proof that he'd cheated while discussing wedding plans with me. So, do you buy that I'm the clingy ex, or that he's the cheating liar? Answer carefully, there's a prize. I dropped a $1 million Venmo transfer split among correct responders. 3 hours later, I smiled at Lucas's engagement Instagram post, 0 likes from any friend or acquaintance, only corporate accounts. You little joke of a designer, the Rowans can crush you like a bug. I serenely blocked the swaggering heir who held no real power. A week later Richard and Victoria rang, inviting me to a gala hosted by the city's richest man. On the surface they wanted to introduce me to other eligible bachelors. In reality they still hoped to push Lucas and me back together. I accepted without hesitation and walked calmly into the opulent hall. Have you heard? The Sterlings from overseas are showing up tonight. The Sterlings? That Sterling family? No way, they've been abroad for ages, why appear at a local party? Amid the buzz I spotted Lucas with Hannah on his arm, arguing with his parents while shooting me triumphant glances. Childish and stupid, I mused, marveling at my past taste. Then the crowd at the entrance rippled. The Sterlings, Victor and Catherine, stepped in, and the entire room gasped. The legendary Sterlings, richer than most nations, just one small deal with them could set anyone for life. Lucas, flushed with excitement, rushed forward first, bowing and scraping. Mr. Sterling, Mrs. Sterling, please allow me to introduce myself. Stop. Catherine's brows pinched. Business can wait. Where's Serena? Lucas's hand froze in midair, as though he hadn't heard her right. Which Serena? Surely not. He followed Catherine's searching gaze, saw the same arch of brow, the same tilt of eye, and cold sweat broke over him. The next second I stepped from the crowd, smiling, and slipped my hands into my parents'. Dad, Mom. I turned to Lucas's bloodless face, curved a half-smile. Let me introduce the gentleman. This is Lucas, the one I called off the engagement with, don't you remember? Rowan Holdings is the firm you personally added to your permanent blacklist file. Chapter 5. Incher Lucas? Victor's brows drew together, authority iced into every line. He flicked a glance at the hurriedly approaching host. Old Yang, you're losing your touch, any stray dog gets in now. The tycoon who had organized the banquet offered an apologetic heap of smiles while shooting Lucas a lethal glare. My lapse, background check slipped. I had no idea your daughter and he. Enough. Ignorance forgives. Catherine waved it away. We flew in last minute, few people even know Serena is our daughter. Don't fret. Victor's expression eased a fraction, but when his eyes returned to Lucas the disgust was raw. Have the family removed. If no one else minds, they still offend my sight. I kept smiling, my arms through my parents, and Lucas stood transfixed, disbelief glazing his eyes. Serena had mentioned finding Victor, true, yet after coming home she'd never said what her parents did. He'd been busy coddling Hannah and had stopped asking. So he'd assumed they were nobodies, probably why she still clung to the Rowans. But how could she be a Sterling? And what cooperation? Lucas couldn't take it. He shook off security and lunged. What cooperation? What gives you the right to cut Rowan off from Sterling? I gave him a bland look. There were several supply contracts I meant to gift your family as my engagement present. Once the marriage was cancelled, the deals naturally died. But I only scratched those contracts. When my parents heard you cheated, they judged your character vile, and assumed your father equally unreliable, so they tossed Rowan Holdings onto the permanent blacklist. Hard to grasp? Lucas's face went chalk white, his hands trembled. Guests who'd attended the infamous engagement gala whispered, ears pricked, recounting the Rowan fiasco in delighted murmurs. My daughter deserves better than a rotted tree. Catherine's glance skewered him. Thank you for letting her cut her losses. Across the room, Richard and Victoria saw the swirl of bodies, assumed Lucas was finally networking with the Sterlings, and beamed their way over. They arrived just in time to hear Lucas rasp, "Impossible, you can't be their daughter." The smiles curdled on their faces. "Serena, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling are your parents?" Richard recovered first, stretching his mouth into a grin. "Why, congratulations. A family reunited. Mr. Sterling, Serena grew up under our roof, she and Lucas have always been close. A tiff, that's all. We're patching things up, why don't we sit down together? I truly adore this girl. You?" Victor's laugh was steel. "You're not qualified to share a negotiating table with us." The public slap sent heat scalding through Richard and Victoria, their smiles hung by a thread. "Since you won't leave, we will." Mother took my hand, we turned and walked out. Powerful clans far stronger than Rowan had come eager to court Sterling tonight, until one tainted name collapsed every prospect. "Old Rowan, your brat offends Sterling and you dare show up? Shameless, spoiled the whole evening, your family's a dead rat in the soup." The host, purple with rage, barked for staff to throw them out. Spotlights swung, someone recognized Hannah cowering near the bar and shouted, "Look, his mistress. He brought her here." Vile, another guest spat. Lucas, still reeling, lurched forward and shielded the shaking Hannah. "Money doesn't make Serena saintly, crack." Richard's palm lashed across his son's face. "Fool. Rowan's stock is already tanking. Look what you've done." Chapter 6. Back inside the car, Mother kept scolding Lucas. My parents had landed 3 days earlier, staying out of sight until tonight so they could back me in public. After I located Victor, they'd meant to accompany me home and discuss wedding arrangements with the Rowans, but Mother required minor surgery and couldn't fly. I'd told them to wait until the ceremony was set, and kept their identity quiet, because the day Lucas rushed Hannah to St. Mary's, something in my gut had whispered suspicion. Now I knew the whisper hadn't lied, I'd bet right. "So that's the Rowan boy, nowhere near good enough for my girl." Mother squeezed my hand. "Once we're home, I'll line up 10 men 100 times better. Pick whoever you like, marriage not required, just have fun. Better still, 20. I laughed, nestling against her shoulder. "Slow down. Didn't we agree to show you and Dad around the country first? We still needed time to learn one another." Lucas was barely a blip, not worth spoiling their trip. After the Sterling heir revelation, Talia stormed in, howling with glee. "Imagine, best friends with the richest heiress in the country." I'm hugging this golden thigh tight. "And Lucas, his intestines must be emerald by now." "Maybe," I said, amused by her triumph. "But he loves Hannah, even if I were a goddess he wouldn't care." "Oh, please, he might not, but his avaricious parents sure do." Talia rolled her eyes. "Companies are yanking contracts left and right, old man Rowan is begging every contact he has. But come to think of it, haven't they come begging yet?" I figured even if Lucas stayed stubborn, his parents would still try the emotional appeal route. Of course Richard and Victoria came begging, I just never saw them. "The young lady has had every dollar you ever sponsored repaid tenfold," the Sterling aide said, neither servile nor arrogant. "She also asked me to convey that Mr. Sterling is simply terminating cooperation, not mounting a targeted takedown, so pleading is pointless." Beyond those 2 sentences, the Rowans had shown up nearly 10 times without ever catching a glimpse of my parents or me. Richard and Victoria were reduced to mute frustration, pushed to the brink. Technically the Sterlings had never attacked them in the open. Yet the message was clear, anyone who stayed friendly with the Rowans could forget doing business with the Sterlings. Everyone in this game was shrewd, there were no ride-or-die friends, only jackals piling on a wounded rival. Watching the stock price plummet, Richard pulled 3 consecutive all-nighters, then collapsed and was rushed to St. Catherine's. With no cards left, Victoria summoned Lucas, cursed him bloody, and ordered him to apologize. But Lucas, frantic as he was, would never bow that easily. "Serena, just because I fell for someone else, you had to be this cruel and leave us no way out. My parents must have been blind to raise an ungrateful wolf like you. Jamie, I no longer carry your wife's surname, my name is Serena now." I ignored his snarls and answered calmly, "Who do you think you are to deserve a lifeline from me?" That was our final call. Afterward Lucas could never reach me again. 3 days later a gossip blog headline rocketed to #1 on trending, a 21st century fable of farmer and snake. The sprawling article painted an orphan sponsored by a wealthy clan who, after reuniting with billionaire birth parents, repaid kindness with betrayal and drove her benefactors to ruin. Half an hour later my name followed, sparking nationwide chatter. Seeing a cluster of Rowan-affiliated marketing firms hosting the hashtag, I almost laughed aloud. Lucas must have been out of his mind to resort to such a filthy trick to threaten me. I screenshot the trending chart and sent it to Victor. Within 30 minutes the top spot had a new occupant. Chapter 7. Alongside the obvious counter of wealthy heir cheats, father's child, then slanders ex, I teamed up with Victor to hand the Rowans a much bigger gift. A full decade of Rowan Holdings tax filings. What the hell? Turns out the Rowan prince is the real snake here. The lady was almost tricked into marriage. Told you never to pick sides in rich folk drama, look how fast it flipped. Young Rowan's clueless, picking a PR fight with the richest man's daughter when he's the guilty one? Yep, smearing her while he's at fault, pure brain-dead move. Netizen scorn instantly flooded Rowan's official page, and rival firms promptly archived the tax filings and FedExed them to the IRS. Hard evidence of tax fraud, Rowan's toast this time. Inside his study Lucas watched opinion invert and slammed his fist into the wall. He'd merely wanted to hurt me, even if only by trashing my reputation. He hadn't expected my parents of barely a month to shield me so completely. He finally understood. Behind me stood not one tree but an entire forest he could never reach. Coddled by the Rowan name, he'd fancied himself savvy and capable. Yet in his first real PR battle he lost like a cur with its tail between its legs. Swallowing that humiliation, he returned home, only to find the Rowan estate emptied. "Dad, Mom, what are you doing?" He stared as his father, haggard, signed the closing papers on the sale of their mansion. "What am I doing? You wretched brat still dare to ask." Richard looked 10 years older. "To plug the tax hole we've mortgaged every asset, every house. Lucas, your mother and I failed as parents, we raised the scourge that destroyed us. From today I'm no longer Chairman Rowan. We've scraped together enough for a small condo to grow old in, live with us or get lost, your choice." "Dad, what do you mean no hope left? The Rowan roots run deep, once the Sterlings go back overseas, who'll still hound us? I'll line up fresh investors and revive the group, why not?" Oddly, even Victoria stayed silent, sighing before she climbed into the car. Without a backward glance they drove off, leaving Lucas shouting in the dusk. Only then did it hit him, he had been abandoned. Used to the Rowan safety net, he'd believed he could do anything. But the mistake he made had hurled the entire clan into an abyss. Restless, he raked his hands through his hair, facing the hollow rooms with no notion of what came next. A secret regret seeped in as Hannah stepped out, cradling their newborn son, eyes rimmed red. "Lucas, why did it have to blow up with your parents? They're still your mom and dad, they won't truly cut you off, just apologize." "What are you implying?" He had never snapped at her like this. "They keep their little condo, I can buy my own place, can't I? Or is the villa what you're clinging to, am I not enough?" Panicking, she hugged the baby and stammered, "Of course not, you're my benefactor, I'll stay with you no matter what." Reassured, Lucas led Hannah and the child away. Easy to say, but soon every one of his cards came back frozen or zeroed. The cash he could actually touch wouldn't cover a decent down payment. With no choice he settled for a cramped subpar unit and began plotting a comeback bid. He assumed his old network would at least land him a cozy vice president slot somewhere. Naive to the end. Former friends sidestepped him, no one wanted his name on their roster. Companies that didn't know him took one look at his resume, saw the Rowan stain, and tossed it into the reject pile. Finally he paid a broker to fabricate a new identity and found work in the next city. Incompetent, he was fired within weeks. Once the Rowan name had cushioned every failure, out in the real world nobody indulged him. Everything he possessed proved worthless, and the blissful marriage he'd defended so fiercely turned ever more chaotic. Chapter 8. It was a year later, the night my plane touched down in the overseas city where my parents lived, that Talia called with news of Lucas. Serena, you have no idea what a juicy drama this turned into, let me fill you in, scene by scene. Under Talia's thrilled narration, I slowly reconstructed the Lucas I had almost forgotten. It really was quite a show. After Hannah moved with Lucas into that cramped apartment, she played the perfect little wife at first. But once Lucas's career stalled, the mask cracked. She sneered that he was useless, that he couldn't keep a roof over their heads or food on the table, that she and the baby were suffering because of him. They fought almost daily. Lucas couldn't stomach it at first, yet he had no way to prove himself, so he swallowed the insults. Little by little he began to miss me. He missed how good I'd been to him, regretted letting Hannah's fleeting allure make him abandon the woman who had stood by him for years. If he hadn't cheated, if I had still walked down the aisle and later found Victor, he would have become the son-in-law of the richest man alive. Fantasies rose like tsunamis and, night after real night, dragged him under with regret. The moment that shattered it all came when the baby got sick and Hannah ordered him to rush the child to St. Luke's. In the crowded corridor, cradling the infant, he suddenly flashed back to the night of our engagement gala. Hannah had stood there in tears claiming the baby was ill. His heart had clenched and he'd bolted, leaving his fiancé behind. Yet the emergency workup showed the child was perfectly fine, no fever, no infection, nothing. He knew then Hannah had staged it, but he'd excused it as insecurity. Marrying Serena had forced him to sideline Hannah for a while, so of course she'd been frantic. Back then he'd actually blamed Serena. Now that resentment had swung full circle and pinned itself on Hannah, drowning in bitter remorse, he mindlessly registered the baby for tests. Then his phone buzzed with the one message he would never forget. A file stuffed with photos and clips. Hannah in college, in bed with one guy after another. He opened only the first few. Blood roared in his ears and his fingers dug into the baby's arm. The infant shrieked. A nurse stepped forward, ready to scold, but Lucas spun the child around. Staring at the little face that looked nothing like him, a desperate suspicion took root. He barked at the nurse to run a blood type stat. The answer came back, type A. His vision blackened, he collapsed on the floor. Both he and Hannah were type O. 2O parents can never produce an A child. The baby wasn't his. Gasping, reason gone, he abandoned the infant on the gurney and bolted for home. Hannah yanked the door open, irritable, and a backhand sent her sprawling into the corner. You lying bitch, he laughed like a lunatic. You cheated on me, ruined everything. Chapter 9. Talia delivered this whole comedy in living color, complete with snapshots. Among the candids she'd scooped of Hannah's extracurriculars was a newspaper still. Lucas sprawled in a pool of blood. Once Lucas stormed out and left the baby unattended, a passerby had knocked the carrier over. The child hit his head, suffered brain damage, and was left permanently impaired. When Hannah found out she lost her mind, grabbed a kitchen knife, and stabbed Lucas nearly to death. It hit trending right here in Eastbrook, couple of days ago. You were probably buried in work and missed it. I skimmed the headline she showed me. Nothing about it rang a bell. I'd spent the past months arranging my move abroad. Lucas had become last year's memory. If not for Talia, I might never have thought of him again. After that vacation I'd taken with Victor and Catherine, I hadn't followed them overseas. I'd asked to stay. My fine jewelry label was at a make-or-break stage at home, and I wanted to carve out my own sky before I flew any higher. Victor had intended to shower me with overseas resources, but, true to form, he respected my call and agreed at once. Still, the network they quietly built for me stateside was enough to light up the constellations. I poured everything into my work, and a year later I stood at the top of the domestic scene. The international offers I'd dreamed of landed right on my bench. It's fine, ancient history for me now, an afternoon soap, I said. No way. If I see it and don't forward it, did it even happen? He has to know how colossally he screwed up. He actually dared to frame us at St. Luke's that night. I laughed. Thanks for avenging me. I've just finished a new parure. I'll courier it to you as a thank you. My pieces are now booked at premiums that outrun supply, and Talia squealed in delight, promising to fly over next quarter to collect it in person. What I didn't expect was to run into Lucas the day I went to meet Talia's flight. He stood at Eastbrook International, pallid, clutching a lavish bouquet of roses, striding toward me. Serena. He couldn't meet my eyes, mumbling at the floor. I heard you were relocating. I just wanted to see you. How have you been? I took a calm step backward, putting air between us. Quite well. Was there something you needed, Jamie? The courtesy in my tone, icy, distant, flayed him. He lifted a reddened gaze. I'm sorry. I was an idiot, I hurt you. I'd broken it off with Hannah. The child wasn't even mine. Could we start? Serena. A sleek Maybach glided to the curb, the window slid down to reveal a razor-sharp profile. Thought you were picking up a girlfriend, who's this? I smiled, opened the door, and told Gu Xiao, not him. Talia's at door 3. This is just an old classmate waiting for someone. Small world. We said hello. I turned back to Lucas's bloodless face and offered a polite curve of lips. Jamie, this is my boyfriend. We're running late. Your roses look a touch tired, nearly wilted. You should pick a fresher bunch on your way home. With that I slipped into the car and we pulled away. Lucas stared at the flawless, dew-pearled blooms and gave a bitter laugh. He knew he'd simply staged another humiliation for himself. Forgiveness was a country he'd never enter again. He and Serena now lived on opposite sides of the universe. The next news reached me half a year later as I paced backstage at a couture jewelry expo. Richard Rowan texted, Lucas had drunk himself to death in his shoebox apartment. I replied, my condolences, then powered off the phone. Love and hate had both expired, everything about him was static now. Before me lay rivers of gemstones, beside me stood Gu Xiao. At my fingertips pulsed everything I had built. They, my craft, my partner, my future, are the ones who will own the rest of my days. The end. Thanks for listening to today's story. If you enjoyed it, hit like and share it with a friend. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, drop your take, and don't forget to subscribe for more gripping tales. See you next time.